Okay, welcome back. So now we ask the question, one of the basic questions that, of course, all of you know already, but a little bit revision would help, which is what is the distinction between the um, unity consciousness and the immanent world, the manifest world that we experience. So I already said that consciousness is the ground of being and there is that oneness, but how is this experimentally discernible? So that question, let me remind you, that aspect is called non-locality. What is my writing stuff? Ah. So just some reminders. So this domain, we are saying, domain of potentiality, and so this domain is characterized by potentiality of subject, subject potentiality, and also object's potentiality. This way of looking at things is common in the uh, philosophical tradition that we call Samkhya in India. I won't get into the detailed difference between Vedanta and Sankhya. That's a very philosophical discussion that can be reserved for the discussion session. But quantum physics basically is based on this Sankhya view of the of reality. The pure Vedantic view is beyond science. Let me just make that statement. You can take it or leave it. This is a very, very difficult philosophical discussion which is almost irrelevant for our purposes. So then we are saying the subject potentiality in a measurement becomes the subject potentiality becomes subject actuality, and this object potentiality becomes the object, manifest object. Manifest subject and manifest object. But manifest subject happens in the brain, or if you want to bring up the living cell at this time, I prefer not to, because this particular course, let's keep to human being. We'll bring up the living cell at a later stage when we talk more about biological systems in connection with the brain. We have to. And that time, even then, we probably won't do it. We'll do it in the second semester because there is a course on evolution in the second semester. We'll do it then. But the basic idea we already have. The difference between life and non-life, we already did a little bit of that in the very first hour. So then the question, important question here, is that how does the subject arise in the brain? Okay. Now all of you had some sort of idea of how this happens, and we call it brain has a tangled hierarchy. But I want you to see how the perspective makes the question different. What is the perspective of the materialist? Materialist brings a perspective. Materialist has to explain everything in terms of matter and matter's interaction. Matter is object. Objects interact with object can only give you object. So what the materialist does is materialist denigrates anything about the subject that gives it a kind of validity. A benign subject is okay with materialists. So materialists would say that something like a subjective experience does occur, but it's benign. It's just an experience, it's just a subjective quality of experience. They call it subjective qualia. Okay? Don't be put off by the word qualia, it's just a special word invented to create a little mystery. Here is something materialists agree that I don't understand. And it's okay because it has no causal power. It's just something that experience has. Okay? See the way they're introducing it? They're saying it has nothing it can do in the world. It has no free will of its own. It has no causal power of its own. It's just something that we cannot deny. It is true that we have it. Okay? So in neuroscience books now, they have this idea of what are we, and we are called philosophical robots. This idea of philosophical robots has become very popular. So human in this description equals philosophical robots, and what does that mean? Robots with benign experience of some qualia, subjective something. And those subjective something can be concept of self, can be feeling, can be all those things that scientific materialism cannot explain. Okay? And what are we doing? For us, the problem is entirely different. Problem again is a problem of explaining the self, because we want to say that there is potentiality of subject. This potentiality of subject has to arise something that is an object, because there is only what is matter in this domain of space and time. It has to be something in space and time that has the subjective experience. So consciousness literally has to identify with some of the objects of the world. And those objects we call living objects. And in particular, in the brain, we are very familiar with it. We do experience a self in the brain. So from this point of view, the question is no longer to explain away, but the question is what is in the brain that enables it to represent consciousness. So how the question changed? In the way of the materialist, the question is how can we get away with saying that brain is just an object because the experience has no causal consequence, whereas for us, the question is very vitally important. What is in the brain that enables brain to capture consciousness? Okay. And then we are noticing that whenever the experience occurs, it occurs through something that we call cognition. Cognition. Cognition is a quality that's associated with any experience that we have. But cognition is not just thinking. Cognition can also have feeling. This is a new addition in this uh, integrated worldview, we put feeling and thinking on equal footing from the beginning. Before, even in my writings, I have always introduced thinking first and feeling next, and been very apologetic about many aspects of feeling. But in general, now we have a lot of understanding of feeling, and later Anil will present some of his work that added to it. So we have even some experimental experts right here, and there are others too. Konstantin sitting over there, he also has some access to some of the apparatuses that are being developed for measurement of feeling, and there could be others. You would be very much invited to share your experiences. So our access to feeling is now very, very good, and there is more psychological work that has been done about many aspects of the feeling, that too experiential, how we can teach people to experience feelings in their body. That has improved substantially, as Valentina will make it clear in the afternoon session. So what I'm saying is that one of the things that will happen in these 10 days that you haven't had before is that from the beginning we'll use both feeling and thinking in terms of developing the whole subject. Okay? Main reason for it is that now we have found good, very, very good theory for asserting the fact that we not only have a self in the brain, but also selves in the body. In other words, we can actually experience, cognize with feeling independently of our cognizing with thinking. Before, I had the feeling that we can only cognize feeling mixed with thinking, that we call emotion. But now it's very clear that if we work on ourselves, it just takes a little bit of spiritual work in order to, a little bit of transformational work in order to experience pure feelings in the body, independent of thinking. Okay, what's the benefit of that? I mentioned archetypes yesterday. They define the purpose of human life. These archetypes can be represented in both thinking and feeling. They can be explored in terms of thinking and feeling. And therefore, in order to really explore them properly, we need to explore them with both thinking and feeling. So although I admit that thinking quality is much more developed in most of us, but still we can catch up with the feeling qualities to develop right here in these 10 days. And let's make an honest attempt. I hope all of you agree that it would be nice to feel in the body. Let's make an honest attempt of actually being able to do that before this 10-day ends. Okay? So cognition apparatus is a must for defining what the particular thing that has to happen in the brain. The self cognizes, the self knows about the object, develops a knowledge about the object, right? Cognition is basic to it. What else does one need in order to have that experience? This is the question. What else is needed? There is a fundamental problem with equations of physics that describes movement of objects. First of all, we had Newton's equation of movement that described the movement of objects according to Newton. We call Newtonian behavior. There was that. I will not write down the equation, don't be afraid. But I have to make the point So that's one equation, and then we have this another equation of quantum physics that we also never will write down, but that there is that equation. You've got to be aware of it, very aware of that equation. That gave rise to everything, all of this that we are assuming that quantum physics does, that we are claiming that agrees with experimental data, right? That is all in this equation. This equation is the equation that says that quantum objects are objects of possibility for consciousness to choose from, when the possibilities are described as a coherent bundle of facets, different facets. So we have all that. Okay? But these equations have one characteristic which is still very baffling. These equations have no cognition, no recognition of time. If you change time to minus time, if you switch the direction of time, equations remain the same. What does that mean? That means that the equations have no way that it can produce an arrow of time, irreversible time that we observe in the physical reality, in the manifest reality. In the manifest reality, it is a fact that time is one way. We can never go backwards. We can write fiction about it all we want, but there is no going backward in time, only forward. Past goes into present, goes into future. Right? So where does this one-wayness of time come from? We can say irreversibility, sure, that's just another word. Some events will be irreversible. Once it has happened, it cannot change, cannot be changed. Where reality forever become established. But how does it actually happen, this irreversibility? If we just had material objects, then irreversibility would be impossible to prove. And indeed, this question is unsettled in physics. We cannot prove how irreversibility of time comes about. But here is an opportunity to see how it can come about. How do I know that I have an experience with an object, or with you, just to make it more concrete? How do I know that you are real and I have seen you? I did see you yesterday, I think. I smiled at you, we hugged, all this. But how do I know that? How do you know that you met me and all this? So it's a simple word to describe it. I have memory of it. I know because my brain has memorized the event when I met you. Okay? See what I'm getting at? So memory has caused this irreversibility of the experience. This experience cannot be reversed. If it could be reversed, things would go back to potentiality. Things come from potentiality. If it can be reversed, it goes back to potentiality. There is never any actuality. But if it is memorized, then it cannot go back to potentiality anymore, because I can distinguish on the basis of the fact that, yeah, here she is, I remember her, seeing her yesterday. That brain memory is available to me right away, and I can describe, not in so much details. I was going to say I can describe what clothes she was wearing. Oh, I remember a little bit. I can describe that indeed. So this memory is very much the other apparatus that is essential because it produces irreversibility of time. This very important concept. Cognition is not possible to erase only because of this memory. And therefore cognition can be created only with the help of memory. If we didn't have memory, cognition will revert back to non-cognition, the original state. Because time is two-way in the quantum equation of movement for the potentialities. All potentiality, we could actualize all we want, but they will go back to potentiality again, the same state. Because there is no time that goes one way that we have created. But with memory, we now have created time that goes one way, and you cannot reverse it anymore. Memory making capacity is absolutely essential for manifestation of the world, is what I am trying to get at. So cognition cannot be created without memory. But likewise, how can we create memory unless there is something to memorize? How can we create memory without cognition? We can, that's obvious. So cognition and memory, these two apparatuses, are co-creators of each other. As this relationship. Each creates the other. Go ahead.
Does this create a paradox, the both being creators of each other?
So this is the tangled hierarchy you recognize. This tangled hierarchy is basic to the experience of self. Because what happens is that when consciousness enters into a device which has a tangled hierarchy, then it gets stuck. Which one to collapse first? Cognition or memory? Nothing in that can be created without the other. But it's an appearance. Actually, consciousness is collapsing them both from the domain of potentiality. So it's a device which consciousness has created to create the appearance that there is a manifest reality. That appearance is what we call experience. So experience happens as an appearance on the unity. So this is partial answer to the question that one of you were asking before. How does the unity split up? Well, we haven't answered the why question yet, but at least how does it split up? It never splits up really. It creates an appearance of splitting up. Okay? And this is very good for understanding science. Why? Because otherwise science becomes very messy. The Newtonian science, one of the very messiness is this time. Not only we cannot explain how the one-wayness of time arises in Newtonian physics, we really are very puzzled. If it does arise, what happens to all these worlds as time goes by? Do we really have a world sitting there for every instant of time? Just think about how messy this concept is, what materialists have created. They don't think. If they thought for a moment, they would see that this is impossible. because time is a continuous variable. So there have to be infinite number of manifest worlds, one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other, that's going on. Does that make any sense? Obviously, from just simple sense of parsimony, we would discard such a model. In other words, the manifest world got to be an appearance. Otherwise, we get into this terrible, terrible picture of what the world is about. That there are this infinite number of worlds, and then the question of all these time travel stories, they come up, because if there are these worlds, then why not run an elevator between these worlds in some way? And people write science fiction, they even write science fiction papers to show how such time travel might be possible. And these papers are published in serious physics journals. Imagine they talk about pseudoscience, this materialist. If this is not pseudoscience, what is? Because we can never verify these things. But these ideas are published because they are based on mathematics. Anyway, forget that comment. But what is very important to recognize, that from a spiritual point of view, this is very, very good. And very, very bad. Very, very good because unity is fundamental. That which is transitory must be secondary. So that part is very good. What is very, very bad is religious traditions, especially, but even spiritual traditions have used this one to negate the world. What they have said is that the sense world is the manifest world of experience is just appearance, and therefore why should we value it at all? Only what is real, that should be valued. In India especially, a great philosopher named Shankara, he particularly gave us this notion in very powerful language, and what a wonderful man he was, so radiant, so wonderful, that people certainly still continue to respect him because he really was a great man, established great things for perpetuation of Vedanta and all this. That extreme confusion he did create in the whole Hindu psychology, science, sociology, and society. Huge misconception about what we should do, how we should live in the world. Okay? Very, very important to recognize what he missed. Not that he was not intelligent, he was super intelligent. Not that he was enlightened. He was not enlightened, he was super enlightened. You cannot be any more enlightened than Shankara. But why is this picture wrong? Because he didn't know about some things which is very fundamentally important. The data was not available in his time. And the idea would be impossible to think about without the data. And the idea is evolution. What seems without the concept of evolution, what seems, especially in the days when we lived without science and technology, what seems is that the world is full of chaos. World is full of chaos. Who can debate that? We look at in our mind, look at inside, and we find chaos. All these things that I call human condition, me-centeredness, negative emotional brain circuits, becoming addicted to pleasure. So now that we have technology, we have changed our view about chaos a little bit, because we can no longer say that there is that much chaos in the external world, but we still have a lot of chaos in our internal world. So now the present version of the materialist denigration of us is that the internal is chaotic, so don't dwell in the internal. Dwell more and more in the external, because look, we have established so much order in the external. And indeed, information processing is full of order. Right? You push a button, you get something. That's order. Nobody can deny the amount of order information technology is promising us. Internal world full of chaos. So forget the internal, concentrate on the external, and will make you happy. You cannot deny such a philosophy. Okay? But an alternative view is also possible. And this alternative view is what we are developing. We are saying that, look, just as the spiritual traditions miss the order of the external world by missing evolution, evolution proves order. How? Evolution shows that the fossils have evolved. And that means that there is a physical law that pervades the world of experience. It's not just experience and they come and go. They are temporary. But experience persists in a certain way. Experience gets better and better. Nobody can argue about that. You read any history, not just the biological history, where we see clearly that the fossils have improved their status in the world. They have more cognition, more capacity of making memory than ever before. Not only that, you can even look at human society and see that people have more capacity for making worldviews. You look at the worldviews that primitive people, hunters and gatherers, had, and you look at the worldview that people have today. Fantastic differences. So there is order in the world, and therefore the world cannot be disregarded. Okay? So this point is a very important point to make. And this is where evolution comes in. And now we can answer that question of why the unity breaks up. Unity breaks up because unity wants to see itself in manifestation, and unity wants to see itself how manifestation develops increasing order. And then it's a question of what is the future of manifestation, how far this increase in order can go, and these are the questions that will eventually be settled. But we can easily make the philosophy that consciousness eventually wants to see if that unity that consciousness established in the domain of unity can be represented in the domain of manifestation as well. We can make such a theory. That, of course, we cannot verify because it talks about the future. Future is not verifiable, but we can be fairly happy with this kind of projection. Because we have recovered the one-wayness of time. We understand that time will move to the future. We understand that past evolution suggests that things are moving towards increasing order. So it's a fair projection from our experience that the order will only increase, and then we'll get a state of some kind of order that will also reflect that unity. Before, the unity was a unity of potentiality with consciousness, and this one will be a display of order in the manifestation of consciousness into separate beings. So what was an order of potentialities now will be an order in actual separate actualities. What is the picture of such an order? The picture of such an order, of course, is that all human beings, the conglomerate of human societies, will become will consist of people who are totally happy, totally enlightened, and all that. Tremendously beautiful picture. Okay? And people actually have theorized that way. In the last century, there are Desjardins and Sri Aurobindo, two philosophers, one in the West, one in the East. They both talked about manifestation in this way. And quantum physics is now supporting that. So that's one thing that we can talk about. The second thing to be introduced, so we introduced tangled hierarchy. This relationship is called tangled hierarchy, this mutual creation.
Sir, one question.
Yeah.
Since, as you say, that it is primarily memory is the apparatus which is creating irreversibility of time. So, is it logical to extend this concept to say that there are enough known cases of complete loss of memory, or people completely losing their entire memory or something, which we observe? Can it create a reversible time and people go back in time because they display behavior of, let's say, they were a child or...
No, but how do we go back in time? You mean reversible memory?
Erasing the memory or losing the memory?
Well, if you erase the memory, then such a person's experience indeed reverses. There is no experience that can be said to be more than a temporary thing. You cannot relive the experience. So such is the doomed reality of the Alzheimer patient, for example, or people in amnesia. They cannot remember who they are because they don't have any ground to stand on. Did I have the experience or did I not? They cannot ask that question. So they have only momentary experience of no validity to the experiences. They don't know if these experiences are real or not.
But basically, even in such a case, even if they lose memory and they have no sense of, so their time virtually has kind of reversed, but the body is still in the present. Body has
but
not
they don't
lost
have
its
any
memory.
self anymore. So eventually their self-identity disintegrates.
Yeah, but what I'm getting to is that even though mind has lost the time, mind has reversed the time, but the body has not reversed the time.
Yeah, the body is there, but the body does not have by itself any cognition of self.
Yeah, but does it mean that body has an independent memory? That's why it's still in the current state, even if the mind has...
No, but what are you validating? Because the body has lost its experience also. And body has cells. I've already made the comment, tangled hierarchy is there in the heart chakra and there is also in the navel chakra.
Yeah. Okay.
Granted that. But the point is that the memory making capacity goes away. Okay, then these cells also would be compromised. Of course, you can say, well, Alzheimer is only in the brain. We have no evidence that Alzheimer occurs in here. So do they cognize in terms of feelings? I cannot answer this question because I don't have any access to, but that is a very, very good subject of research. Do Alzheimer patients still feel? Can they feel and do they have cognition of the world on the basis of feeling? This would be a very good question. But then the Alzheimer patient also has to be aware of feelings in the body. Most people are not. So it's a very hard question. Yeah, let's hear from a doctor.
So Alzheimer's, usually those people, they remember their past. In a childhood, they have feelings of childhood.
But the childhood memories are intact because that part of the memory, the permanent memory is not gone. It's only the
recent memory is lost.
Yeah. And the capacity for making memory is gone. They cannot do, that's the problem. So the memory of the past, that is still there intact. So they have feeling, thinking in that domain. Eventually though, even that retrieval becomes difficult because retrieval becomes difficult. They cannot make even a cognition properly because there is no reference point for the cognition. So eventually they lose the capacity of even remembering the permanent memory.
Majority of them behave like in later stage childlike, because they will be in childhood memories only they will be helping in the last stage.
Yeah, this is a good point. And if you have the opportunity with working with Alzheimer patients right now, please get into this aspect of what Anil just raised,
Yeah,
because they have these feelings and the brain memory is affected. Does not mean that the memory making capacity of the heart, little brain in the heart, is also affected. So if those memory making capacity remains, then they will still have a tangle hierarchy in the heart, and that will enable them to feel a self associated with feelings. Do they have such a self? Do Alzheimer patients lose completely their self identity, or do they have some self identity connected with affect?
No, they have self identity.
Connected with affect, especially.
Yeah.
For example, they do have feelings of love when they see their loved ones.
Yeah.
They
will
do.
recollect, but slowly. But they will forget the way to the washroom. They will, when they go out of their home, they will not get the route how to come back. The present they will not be knowing. But if you sit for 5 minutes with them, loved ones, if they sit, I mean, they will recollect the memories and all. So we can do research on this. I can talk with my psychiatrist colleagues.
But eventually, I have read stories that they cannot recognize that somebody is their wife or child.
No, not immediately. They will take little bit time to recognize. It depends on
until they become aware that feelings are arising in the heart.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's your answer on it. So the affects remain then. The self connected with affect will remain. So that's very good thing to know. And that's because the memory making capacity of the heart, brains of the heart, that remains intact. Wonderful. Self experience is one of the experiences. The self experience arises because of the tangle hierarchy. This I don't think I need to go into. You all know the story of tangle hierarchy and how it gives rise to self experience. We have gone through the self referential sentence, the liar's paradox, I am a liar, that discussion. Do we need to do it again? No need. The sentence become isolated with the rest of the world. Anytime you have a tangle hierarchy, Victoria is looking with a little puzzle because you had only exposure to this one time when I spoke very briefly in Prague. But okay, so you need a little bit of reading to do. That's your homework. So, but everybody else remembers that discussion, right? So let's go over the idea of making software. This is a concept that relatively new to some of you because in my latest workshops I include this discussion, but in the some of you have taken the QA workshop earlier, and then I did not expose you to this part. So the software making, let's talk about that a little, in connection first with feeling and then with thinking. Software making. So we'll talk about feeling first. We now have a very, very good understanding of all this. So the idea is that the living forms carry out purposive functions. You remember purpose? We talked about yesterday a little bit. The purpose comes from the archetypes, and the purpose comes also into evolution. How does consciousness inject purpose? It injects purpose through just the simple statement that a choice can be made with a purpose. So we make this additional hypothesis. Yes, consciousness chooses the actuality from possibility. Now we are making an additional assumption that every collapse event, this actualization event, is an event of purpose. It does it with the purpose of making this one-way evolution towards evolution of better and better manifestation of consciousness. Okay? It just wants to make the experience richer and richer. That's the purpose. Okay? So as soon as that has been introduced, we can easily recognize that all biological organs, this conglomerate of cells, they will have a hardware to carry, they will have a software to carry out purposeful functions. Okay? And as I argued already, the software, for example, for organs, the software can be easily understood. The software will be the hardware in software. Material part of the software will simply be on-off switches on the genes. All genes in the body has the same, all genes are the same in all the cells of the body, because all the cells were created from that one initial cell, the zygote. And so all the cells have the same genes, no doubt. But how do different cells perform different functions? Because some genes are turned on in some of the cells, depending on which organ this cell belongs to, and other cells are not turned on. And so the software, material part of the software is very simple. It's not in the genes, it's epigenetic. Scientists are agreeing with that. And what does this epigenetic software does? It simply turns on those genes to make those proteins which will be performing the function of that organ. As simple as that. No difficulty in understanding it, right? So this is the part which we say is hardware in software. This is material. But then the question that the materialist avoids is that what made this hardware in software? What made this epigenetic software? They will say, well, evolution somehow produces it. Fine. Is there an alternative model? The alternative model, of course, is the quantum model. And what does quantum model have to propose? Quantum model has to propose that, okay, consciousness, and then there are these subtle intermediaries, the quantum intermediaries. And these quantum intermediaries have to be given a name. Once I was talking with Konstantin of this problem because Rupert Sheldrake uses the word morphogenetic field for this name, but morphogenetic means genesis of form, not genesis of function. So I have always been very unhappy about using the term morphogenetic for these fields that creates the software. And Konstantin is a very good etymologist. So he looked up the dictionary of etymology that he always has in his library and finds the word liturgical. So now we are using the word liturgical. So notice how this software is going. So first we have the organs. We say the organ performs purposive functions. Then we are saying, well, the functions, purposive functions, in order to do that, we must have genes on and off, Some genes will have to be off, some genes have to be on to make suitable proteins. So things that does that, we are talking about that part as hardware in software. This is still material. So far it's material territory. But then something material cannot do, which is how this software was built. This question materialists have a very poor answer, only evolution. That doesn't work. So we have a better explanation. Sheldrake originally called these fields that consciousness uses to run this or make this hardware in software, morphogenetic field, we are calling this liturgical fields, because liturgical means function. Liturgical fields. So every organ which is this hardware plus software, this is what the organ is. Every physical organ has associated with it a liturgical fields that helps consciousness to make the hardware in software. Just as we make a computer work with software that we create with our mind. We put our mental meaning in the computer through the creation of software. And that software also could be hardware in, as oftentimes it is. Some of the function switches are in the computer itself. That's the hardware in part of software.
So this is basically like embedded software.
Embedded software, exactly. So in this way, the analogy is perfect. This is what we do with our computers. So it follows then that every physical organ have associated with it, let's have this notation for a correlated, has associated with it a V organ. V organ, V for vital. V stands for vital. We'll bring the word vital. Vital is life, life-related feeling. And it is the movement of this vital organ that we feel. And that, of course, also has vital memory. So these feelings will have memory. How do I know such memories exist? I love you, I see you, and immediately I see you, there will be nostalgia, there will be memories. What kind of memories are they? They are vital memories. They are memories of feeling. They are feelings that expands our heart. How do we explain these feelings? Because we are simultaneously as the organ, immune system is the organ here, immune system function is affected, immune system suspends its function in the presence of a loved one, immediately the associated memory will be excited, and that's the memory that I feel. Okay, in this way, a complete model of feeling can be made. And those places in the body where we feel strongly these feelings are called chakras. Chakras are those places where consciousness has made these softwares and associated vital organ and then collapses those simultaneously. But some places has a self and some other places of the chakras don't have self. Okay, chakras you are already familiar with. You all remember there are 7 chakras. Which one has the self? Brains are found only in the navel chakra and in the heart chakra. So those are the 2 places where there will be feelings independent of thinking. Other places, it's not like that. For example, in the case of the lower chakras, the brain already has taken over the functions long time ago, even before the neocortex came into the picture. This is the case of the limbic brain or the midbrain or the mammalian brain, which already has these apparatuses like amygdala that we need to have these experiences of this base level survival related feelings. Okay? Does the brain intervene also in the heart and function of the heart and the navel chakra? Yes, it does. We have discovered now psychoneuroimmunology and psychoneurogastrointestinology, and that clearly shows that yes, the brain even has communication, and therefore it can intervene into the affairs of the heart and in the affairs of the navel. So indeed, materialists can make the point that yes, it is the brain which is guiding the feelings at these chakras. How do we discern such a thing? We discern it by showing that we can feel feelings independently in these chakras, in the heart and in the navel. And if we do that, we can do things that cannot be explained by the brain model. In other words, we can make quantum healing model, for example, where we can get certain results out of the brain model, or we can get results out of the chakra model. And then which one works better will settle these issues. Is it psychoneuroimmunology? Certainly psychoneuroimmunology is valid in some cases, because that also is based on experimental data. And so here is a beautiful example of how science is done. The reason that we are establishing a university is precisely because to research such things. We have told you repeatedly in the brochures that we have circulated is that we wanted to get into master's program and then the PhD program. The reason is exactly this. These are the questions. These are the questions we have to settle. So the purpose of the university, purpose of the education is twofold. One is to transform, and the other is to establish the worldview, put the worldview in very content in a form that can compare and win the battle of which one is more valid with the materialist science. We have to do that. That is the purpose of also this particular education that you are receiving. Okay? I hope that's okay, because don't just think that transformation is the only thing that needs to be done. No, we also have a worldview change to which we have to contribute. Eventually, the other worldview has to give away. The spiritual traditions could not do it, because the wisdom traditions themselves were very divided, and therefore they never could settle the issue with religion, which is superior. The esoteric branch, which is called the spiritual wisdom tradition, or the exoteric branch, which is called the religion. They never could settle that. But in science, do we need to create an exoteric branch, the materialist science, and esoteric branch, the quantum science? No. Eventually, we must show, and we should be able to show, that quantum science is superior. It is inclusive. It includes all the results of the materialist science and gives results where materialist science fails to explain. Okay? So let's then talk about the brain, as in the neocortex, and brain memory. So brain likewise has memory, And what is that memory about? There will be some vital, but there will also be mental. So brain, in addition to the vital software, will have mental software, mental memory. Okay? That's something special that will be in the brain. In fact, brain's main function is to make these mental memories. So be very appreciative of the following models of the memory. I'll go into much more detail when we do quantum neuroscience, that class. But here, immediately notice that just there is a brain component of memory. And if this component is excited, automatically that will play the mental memory. Okay. Thanks. And this creates the illusion that the brain is producing the mind. Right? Because it's automatic. Just as the feeling, the organ functions, immediately the feeling arises because feeling is correlated, non-locally correlated. So if one is excited, the other is also collapsed simultaneously. So as soon as the brain memory, the little place where there is the effect on the brain, physical brain, as soon as that is excited, immediately the corresponding mental memory is immediately evoked, and therefore will have that memory experience. This creates the impression that mind is not needed. So why do you think that mind is needed? Because, as we argued before, mind is needed in order for brain to function at all, for consciousness to connect with the brain, mind is needed. Of course, vital itself could connect it, but then we would have just have feeling. The addition of the brain's capacity of making memory of the mind has helped us to gain much, much better capacity to make a worldview. The worldview that we can make with feelings is very, very simple worldview. Like and dislike. I like this feeling, I don't like this feeling. Very simple, world becomes very, very simple. Black and white, I like, I don't like. With mental, we can introduce many, many shades of the worldview, much, much more detailed. So this is an advancement. And then when we respond to archetypes, that's even another series of advancements. In this way, we are proceeding to make an advanced view of the world. Okay? But convince yourself that this model, we repeatedly have to do this, compare with the materialist model. Materialist model of memory is extremely inept model. Just think of how difficult to make a convincing model of memory retrieval if you think of brain as a computer. Computers have buttons to push if we want a particular memory to come alive, to come to forth. And we know which button to push. There is no such thing with the brain. How do we retrieve memories then? On top of it, neuroscience has shown that memories are often broken down and stored in different parts of the brain, the physical ones. Very difficult to understand how that can be retrieved at all. So memory retrieval is a huge problem in the conventional material way of thinking of the brain. And look at how simple it is to understand in this case. The brain circuits. We have a memory circuit consisting of different little neurons, all being part of that memory, little records, but the records are not actually memorizing the mental part. The records are only triggering the mental part. So when I see you, what is happening is that that particular stimulus is exciting that memory that I saw you before. That's a part of the brain is involved. But the image that I have of you, that's completely mental image. Okay? Why? Why that has to be mental image? Think about the way we perceive. I perceive and I make your image in my retina. Eye has a retina, this part we know very well. Indeed, a chemical image will be made on the retina. This we have verified, no doubt. But then, how is this retina processed by the rest of the brain? Neurons are basically electrical apparatuses. So this chemical image is converted into an electrical image by these neurons. How is it processed? Okay, we have a very advanced model of processing with the tangle hierarchical memory cognition apparatus model. That's good, that's beautiful. So we have a self. So we don't have to worry about thinking of a homunculus looking at a television set. That's the picture that conventionally people have. And that is really a ridiculous picture, because obviously no such thing makes any sense. Who is looking at the homunculus, for example? But apart from that, what is making sense of this electrical image? The image is electrical, there is no denying it. Just like the image on the television set is being created by electrons, or the computer monitor that is being created by electrons, causing fluorescence, and it's all electrical image. How do we make sense of it? We make sense of it through our mind. Through our mind. So mind is essential to give meaning. And that is how every physical image has associated with it, every physical sensation has associated with it a mental experience as well. So we have reversed the physicalist conception of memory. Physicalist thinks everything is actually material, and the material cognition is all there is. We are saying that no, you cannot even have cognition of a sensation without the thought or the feeling. Thought and the feeling are essential component to make any sense out of these material images. So there is no sensation without a feeling or without thinking.
Can we also say that the sensations and the feelings, they also have a tangled hierarchical relationship? Because sometimes a sensation can bring the image, or the image can
They are
bring
not
the
co-creators, no. The sensation are taking place and feeling is giving an ability to, the cognition is being done by the feelings. The knowing is being done by the feelings. But the self is not arising because of the tangle hierarchy. They are not co-creators. They are independent creations, right? Because one is arising from the sensory apparatuses and the other is arising from the correlated vital part of the software, okay? So it's not the tangle hierarchy is not between them. Tangle hierarchy is with the memory making. Both the physical and the vital, the memory making. Okay? Okay? So, you see how a clear model is emerging of our experiences? Yes? Any questions?
So what is can you put a light on difference between thinking and consciousness?
Say it again.
Can you put a light on difference between thinking and consciousness?
Different form of?
Difference between thinking and consciousness.
Difference between thinking and consciousness. Okay? Now try. Go on, go on. Oh, I will stop. What do you think?
Sometimes I think it is, I mean, nearly, they are nearly same, or sometimes consciousness is self. So I mean, if I want to bifurcate them exactly, how to do, like, I mean,
Yeah,
thinking and
I know, but this is a very basic question because Descartes, who was a great philosopher, remember he made this statement, I think, therefore I am. He identified thinking and consciousness himself. What's your answer?
Well, I was going to ask something similar. You were saying about the brain, and I think Descartes made a big mistake because the brain is what thinks. That's what you were saying, and consciousness has to do more with awareness, which is beyond the brain, or that's what I'm listening. So it seems like the problem is meaning. It's when you have the brain and you have the thought and you identify with the thought, then everything is lost. So it seems. I don't know. That makes sense?
Yeah, it's making a lot of sense. So if we identify with the object, then that confusion will occur. Consciousness is just the object. So
Yeah.
we have to look at this very, very carefully. And this is as good a time as any. So let's look at the experience.
So I have just one thought. This thinking and consciousness, I believe that thought is a collapse of the consciousness itself. So it's one of the bodies.
Yeah, so consciousness and meaning possibilities, and then collapses, I, subject, and thought. But why do I get the impression that I am the thought? This is real. For some people, really, materialists, for example, they see nothing about the I. They only see the thought.
I can say, if as a human being, I can see this is my thought. So I am not the thought. I can look at the thought from a third party view that this is what I thought. So that way, I am not thought.
Okay. That's an attempt to make thought and I separate. But I can also think of me, and then I become the thought.
So I am the ego, the conditioned ego speaking.
Oh, that's just another word. But how do you answer the question that when I think of me, I become a thought, I become the object? So how do you get out of this? Very, very important question. This is the question that we really have to understand. This me-centeredness we complain about. Why shouldn't people be me-centeredness? Why shouldn't people think? Because look at how easily we can make the I into a me. I look at the I and I is objectified. I is a me. So what makes us think that there is an I?
I think the way out of this loop is because I also have the capability to think, to use thinking itself to separate me from I. Even though I think of me and I become an object at that time, but I also have the capacity to think that I am not me.
Yeah, but that's just another thought. And then I convert that I into me very easily. Please.
maybe the concept of memory and conditioning. So when we have an experience, we remember that, and that forms conditioning, and over time we develop a sense of this I. And
Yeah.
that's where it comes from.
Yeah, but the conditioning is what partly is confusing us, correct? Because the conditioning is produced by memory, obviously. We haven't gotten into the details yet, but we will
Yes.
in the future. And you may have it already because you have taken previous courses. But the point is that being made here is that any thought of I that arises, that I am doing this or doing that, I'm talking with you, I can watch me talking with you. So I have made myself a me talking to you, right? How do you get out of this dilemma? What's the difference between me and the I? Because any I can convert into me just by looking at that I doing whatever it is that it is doing. Agreed? All I can be made into a me because we have this power of looking at that experience myself. Introspection. We can look at the I looking at you. How do we know that we really have an I?
So this is possible because if we reverse this question, I think therefore I am has to be reversed. I am therefore I think.
Yeah.
So I am is free to do anything.
Yeah.
Thinking
Good attempt. But does this work? Can the I do that? Is I the primary? How do you prove it? That
Means I as consciousness. I
Yeah.
am, therefore I think.
you are
I as consciousness.
you are
I
doing
as the observer.
You are doing very good. But how do you prove it?
Because when I take this chain of sequence, I becoming me, I observe myself, and then the observer also becomes the observed, that chain cannot go to ultimate levels. There is a unity consciousness which comes there. And that unity is the one which is saying, I am, therefore I can think, or I can feel, or I can live.
Very
I can
good.
die.
Okay, so let's do a meditation and see this process. If this is true, that there is a place, an I, that cannot be made into a me, then we should be able to see that even in our normal experiences. Do we see that in some way? Just by simple meditation we can decide this point. Is what Vikas is saying is true? Is there an I which has no me? You cannot make that into a me. That would be the proof that no, this I is quite genuine, because there is a place where you cannot make the I into a me anymore. Right? That what would be an experiential way of ascertaining that very fact. It is very simple to actually ascertain that very fact. So let's do this meditation, okay? Very simple, very simple. We have just the right amount of time, 2 minutes. No, it would take actually 5-7 minutes, but we are going a little bit extra. I hope you don't mind. All right, sit comfortably. You know how to get comfort very effectively is to squeeze your muscles as you breathe in. Squeeze, 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 and breathe out and relax the muscle. Okay, do it a couple of times and you will feel quite relaxed. Okay. Close your eyes and think something. I am speaking, that too becomes a thought, because this thinking would prompt other thoughts in you. In effect, you are looking at a series of thoughts in your mind's sky. Okay? And just continue looking at these thoughts. for a bit. One after the other. Don't get attached to any particular thought. That's the only rule. This is called mindfulness meditation because you are watching the thoughts that usually come to our mind's eye when I just sit down and watch our thoughts. Now you're getting a hang of it, and do the next thing. Watch you watching the thoughts. Make this I that is watching the thoughts into a me. Okay? So who are you now? You are now the witness. Witness is watching, the I watching the thoughts, making the I into a me. Do it for a couple of minutes. I won't speak during this time. This witnessing meditation is very interesting. Watch the I watching the thoughts. Both polarities of an experience, subject and object. I am watching both. Okay, very slowly open your eyes. Anybody feel a little relaxed? Please raise your hand. Amazing. Where is the relaxation coming from? All you are doing is watching yourself, watching thoughts. Where does the relaxation come from? What does the relaxation mean?
Thoughtlessness.
For?
Thoughtlessness. There is no state of thought.
Thoughtlessness.
Awareness. Awareness.
But it was not thoughtlessness because after all you are watching me. So watching I cannot be entirely thoughtless because that is a thought of me. So implicitly the thought is there. So it's not the thoughtlessness.
Disassociating. Detached.
The disassociation from the me is taking place and we're falling into that indestructible self that has no me. It's not exactly fall into it and stay there, but fall into it just a little bit, and immediately back to the I awareness that becomes me. But the process invariably will produce a little bit of touch of that which has no me. So that which is no me we call quantum self, and quantum self is our doorway to unity. In fact, it's nothing but unity. Quantum self has no place to stand on. It has no identity. It's just the unity. So what happens when we do that is that we get this expansion of consciousness. And this expansion of consciousness is also happiness, relaxation. So this meditation is called relaxation meditation for good reason, but what it is showing us is even more important. By showing us that consciousness expands this way, it is showing us that there is a consciousness which is unity consciousness. It is giving us a hint. This is why all spiritual traditions, this is another agreement with wisdom traditions. Religions don't talk about such things. They have no concept of this kind of thing. But spiritual traditions do have this recognition, and they do talk about inner self and transpersonal self. We're calling it quantum self, and this is a very important thing to where the worldview of quantum is uniting science and spirituality. So we'll end the session here, but take this with you and remember this is a huge intensive that we are doing. It would help you greatly if, of course, you have a relaxed lunch and of course you talk with your friends during lunch and all that. But if you have a little bit of time between lunch and the next class, which will begin at 3, then ponder about these different things that we have gone through. Nothing can substitute for your own reflection on things. This is the very important part of such intensives that we do. It works only because you regurgitate in your mind what has happened this morning. Okay? Thank you so much for the class listening. Wonderful.